Good to be here with you all. Good to be part of another urban retreat. I did my first urban retreat in 2012, I think, and found it a very exciting time. Really, during the urban retreat, the same things are going on as always go on at the centre, but it's doubled in intensity and marketing effort. It's good fun, so I hope you're enjoying your week. I couldn't be here last night. I lead a study group with Buddhist, which is on a Monday. So I said, I'll do the group, you do the main shrine room. No, I'm just joking, there are more people involved than that. But I couldn't be here last night for Surya Gupta's talk, so forgive me if what I say is not completely sequential, but I believe you heard about a method of personal development. You can nod as if you did. I know you may not have been here, but I won't know. So you can look very knowing about personal development if you like. And so I think that was to do with, once you've encountered the Buddha's teaching, particularly through a teacher, which we're lucky enough to have, there are certain things that you're given, and one of those is a method of personal development. In other words, a way of working on your mind personally. So working with your character and your shape, your history, conditioning, circumstances, through a set of meditation practices mainly, and growing. Okay. My talk, I know it's called Know the World, which has caused me a certain amount of confusion, several chats with Bodhimati. I've come up with an alternative title, which is Personal Development Has Consequences. It sounds vaguely threatening, doesn't it? You're probably all familiar with the Buddhist teaching that actions have consequences, which often lazily we associate with if you do bad things will happen to you, which without time to go more into it isn't exactly what Buddhism's saying. But also, in a sense, if you do good things happen to you that you couldn't have predicted. And if you really take on to develop yourself as an individual, things will continue unfolding within you, but crucially, as I'll hope to explore tonight, out in the world that is not exactly not in your control, but because they're creative, weren't necessarily part of your plan. If you really take on to be creative personally, the world around you will start to become more creative as well. Okay, so that's my theme, more or less. And I think this is because personal development, which here we're going to call individuality, I'll come on to that, becoming more individual, must express itself outwardly. The Buddha himself found this. So when the man who used to be known as Siddhartha Gautama had sat under a tree and vowed not to get up again until he gained full and perfect enlightenment, after that had happened, he sat there thinking, what shall I do? I've seen the nature of reality, I can't unsee it, and it was extremely difficult to get there. Very, very subtle. He called it various things. Subtle, only visible to the wise, hard to grasp. And he estimated that not very many people would be able to do the same thing, and it would be what he called troublesome and weary for him to try to tell them. Okay, so there's a great sort of pinch point in the drama of his life, after which the great breakthrough has happened. It's still essentially a private affair because it's not gone anywhere outside his mind yet, and he's considering at that point basically keeping it to himself. Okay, and you can guess what some of the consequences of that would be. One of which is we would not be here. I don't know what would be here. It would be some kind of like Blade Runner 3 scenario on a rainy autumn evening in London without Buddhism. But it would be pretty momentous, wouldn't it? If the Buddha had not taught, you'd have never heard of a Buddha or Buddhism. You'd have never come across this particular method of personal development. Hopefully other ones would have arisen. I would contend that they wouldn't have been as good. And we would not have come together over this common ideal. But he did decide to teach, so that's lucky for us. In the drama, a god or spirit, a very sort of high-ranking god or spirit, heard the thought in his mind, shall I actually not bother? It doesn't quite put it like that, but the words are almost like that. I'm not sure I can face the task. A being hears the thought in his mind, manifests and says, there are some with but little dust in their eyes, and they will be able to see. So please, for the good of the many, for the good of the world, please teach them. So that's the first thing he goes and does. He thinks of his friends that he used to practice with, who rejected him because he started taking solid food, which for them was very beneath one's dignity to actually eat. They thought that starving yourself was one of the methods of divorcing the mind and the body, and the mind going somewhere completely immaterial and thus touching reality. Anyway, they'd rejected him when he ate, so they were determined to be rude to him. When he went and found them, out of compassion, what we now call compassion. They were determined to be rude to him. So radiant was his presence when they arrived that actually they did get a seat ready, call him respectful things, and listen to what he had to say. He communicated to them something of the experience of this irreversible breakthrough. It took a little while. They didn't get it at first. However, they were receptive and they were open, and they created what we would call a rota. So one would take a turn clearing out the latrine, one would take a turn begging for alms, and a couple of them would listen to what he had to say, and then they would rotate. Okay, so they basically created a community in order to hear his teaching. They did things that needed to be done, and they opened up to the expression of this experience that he had had. Okay, in a sense, they were the first spiritual community in the sense that we would understand it. Okay, so this is seen by our teacher Sangharakshita as a further development merely of the Enlightenment. So it's not that you have the Enlightenment experience after which it's no longer possible to act unkindly or in an unaware way. That experience itself would flow out into communication with others, because if you are as deeply aware as it's possible to be, and as full of kindness and love for beings as it's possible to be, you could not but want the same for them, and that would express itself as communication. So that's part of what I mean with my little joke, personal development has consequences. In a sense, you can't keep it to yourself if the development is real. Okay? In that way, by and by, cutting a long story short, the spiritual community is formed. In our own version of things, in our own efforts, something like becoming a mitra, as we call it, which you could see some people doing on Sunday night if you're interested, means becoming a friend to the community, publicly declaring you're a Buddhist, basically, or becoming an order member. So anyone you see with one of these, a kesa, which means a lifetime commitment to the ideals. Again, it can't be a private matter. You declare it publicly, you declare it in a ritual. You don't just think it, I'm a Buddhist and I want to practice, or even I'm a Buddhist in this dispensation and I want to practice until my death. You don't just identify as that, you have to actually enact it. So you ritually enact your wish to do that, and then try to spend the rest of your life expressing it. Easier said than done. In this way, what our teacher called individuals are created. So I'm just going to gloss that quickly, because it's delicate language. Because of individualism or selfishness, i.e. the world rotating around the individual, the vocabulary is slightly unfortunate. He knew that there was a risk in it, Sangharakshita, our teacher. So he's being very particular about this term, an individual, and developing your individuality. He's given whole lists of what that means, but it means things like becoming more individual, means things like becoming comparatively free from group conditioning. Group meaning something like a family or a company, or even a nation or a race, all the other things we might identify ourselves with that form a group. Okay, comparatively free of that conditioning. It doesn't mean you've removed that thing from yourself. It just means your thoughts and emotions and actions are not dictated merely by that anymore. Okay, you've become more creative. An individual has developed their awareness, especially of their own emotions and thoughts, but also of their skills, tendencies, weaknesses, and hence their impact on others. Okay, they become more aware of all of those things. And it's not psychologically dependent on others. This is like a 10-point list, so I won't read it all. But not psychologically dependent on others, that means you don't act in such a way as to gain approval that you're afraid of losing, because then you'll be unpopular. Okay? So an individual has developed beyond that drive. And hopefully we can all identify with that need to become an individual, and actually the difficulty. If you really look into it, if you meditate more, and if we're honest about our minds, we'll know that we, at least sometimes, if not quite often, speak or act, however subtly, in such a way as to try to make somebody like us or accept us or not reject us, not to create an uncomfortable moment, not to suffer painful consequences. Okay? So individuals are created via this process, your personal development, those qualities developing. Another consequence is that those individuals will naturally want to gravitate towards each other. Okay? If you're developing in that way, even if you just come to a few meditation classes, of course you will want to be in communication with other people who are doing the same. In my own case, I think this actually came first. I think before I'd even meditated, as I was reading my first Buddhist book and hearing even that there were Buddhist centres at all, I wanted to go to one and speak to some people. That's one of my first impulses. Not long after I'd been to a few sessions, I wanted to live with other Buddhists. I hardly knew a thing about Buddhism, hadn't practiced it very much yet, but the community that Bodhimati mentioned we live in, I wanted to go somewhere like that, and not just be with flatmates anymore, where the agreement is basically to do with rent. There's rarely an agreement to do with cleaning. Try as I did. Remember a particular rota I had written falling behind the fridge, and I rescued it and blue tacked it up twice more, and the third time it fell. I noticed I was the only one blue tacking it back up, and I was the one who'd written it, and I don't think anyone else was cleaning, so I thought I need to move out. Perhaps the others were glad too. So I was looking for a community, and speaking of communities, I always have a moment before a talk at the dinner table in the community where I say, oh golly, I'm giving a talk and I don't know what to say, what shall I say? And we batted around for a while, and sometimes a pearl drops in from somebody else, and I use it. As with this time, our friend Prajnamanas was over to dinner. He said, I rather like this, that you have a meditation class so that you can have a tea break, so that you can make some friends. I liked that. If I'd heard it when I first came along, however, I think I would have found it a bit creepy. So, sorry if I've passed that on to you at the wrong time. Because I didn't think of myself as going to a Buddhist centre because I wanted friends. I already had friends. So I would have been slightly stung by the suggestion that that's why I was going along. And it's not the only reason. I wanted to manage my mind more effectively with meditation. I'd been kind of stressed and unhappy and a bit ill and a bit directionless, and I wanted to kind of clean all that out, and I knew that meditation probably had a lot to offer in that way. And I did have friends, but looking back, frankly, I know that I needed much deeper friendships, and friendships with people who wanted to grow like I did. Okay, so individuals naturally gravitate towards each other. That means that organisation is inevitable. I once met a man at an airport. I must have been visiting a Buddhist centre abroad, or else he just said, "What do you do?" I said, "Oh, I live and work at a Buddhist centre." And you always think gulp at that moment, because the conversation could go really well, or you could find yourself explaining again something that that's hard to understand, actually. And he said, this was his particular dogma, he said, 2 people talking about a religion, great. As soon as you have 3, it's ruined. Like, it's a group. He said it's a group, and it'll go down the pan. And I know what he means. I know what he meant. So I know he's probably coming from a sincere place, but it's not true. In fact, it's a bit ridiculous. If you want to build a spiritual community, of course you need to step into the inevitable imperfections, which is what he was obviously passionate about, the imperfections of human individuals associating together. Okay? So you basically take that risk. That's another of the consequences of personal development. mundane organisations have always tried to make the world better. Okay, civilization can't help becoming more complex, and then you need responses to problems of law and order and distribution of resources and, I don't know, how does the agriculture work and what is a state, and all of that's got to sort of rumble on during the course of history. And in a sense, that's a kind of development. From the Buddhist point of view, however, for as long as those organisations only seek to organise the world as we perceive it and as we think it exists, they're not actually solving the problem of suffering. One of the rather painful lessons of politics and history seems to be something along those lines. I don't mean to knock the efforts, good efforts in politics, but if individuals are becoming more individual and associating together, their horizon is already rising above what can be achieved with politics, I would argue. A really good story to look into, I haven't got much time to go into this, but is Dr. Ambedkar in India. He grew up in the caste system, encoded into at least certain forms of Hinduism, a terribly oppressive form, not just of organisation but of thought, where individuals are made to feel completely wretched, as if the task assigned to them by the circumstances of their birth are the filthiest, most menial tasks needed by any community, and that is their karma, and their duty is to fulfill that karma because they've been unskillful in a past life, and the only way to purify that is to live in degradation and poverty. He'd grown up like that, but attained a really high level of education, spent some of that time in Britain, went back to India, was first law minister, and drafted a constitution for India that outlawed untouchability. So he was a member of this group below the whole caste system called the Untouchables. He managed to outlaw untouchability. Okay, but what did he observe following that? That the situation was basically the same. I'm paraphrasing here a kind of, well, I won't say a tragedy, a very, very poignant story, because it doesn't end in tragedy. He saw through this terrible disillusionment that the minds of individuals have to change. You could change a system, but he achieved basically the highest you could achieve from his circumstances and in his society. Unbelievable kind of height to ascend to and complete apparent systemic change. And in his own experience, it fell flat on its face. So he thought the revolution's got to be in the mind of the individual. So people have to become all those things, comparatively free from group conditioning. Because one of his frustrations, actually, was that the people of this so-called, or used to be called, untouchable caste, even themselves sometimes had difficulty not thinking of themselves in that way. He worked very hard to try and get them out of that thinking, and of course the people are pressing them into that kind of thinking. But all of those people had to become comparatively free of group conditioning, more and more aware of themselves and other people, and so on. So he became a Buddhist, and to cut a long story crudely short, succeeded in persuading hundreds of thousands of people, of ex-untouchables, as they're now sometimes called, or Dalits, to convert to Buddhism, which they could then understand originates in the freedom of their own mind. Then you have what we call a Sangha. So in their situation or in ours, where you've got people becoming more individual, associating freely according to those ideals that they share, you've got spiritual community. I'm just reviewing where to go now according to time. Perhaps I'll just say something else about my own involvement here before I go on. Some of the first touches that I experienced of this were small things that made a huge difference. So when I was in my first year coming along here, it's slightly awkward, very tender. It is a slightly awkward, very tender time, or it was for me. Buddhism already meant a huge amount to me, but I didn't have much experience to contextualize that in. I didn't have much of a story yet as a Buddhist person. I didn't even really necessarily call myself that yet. But I think I had a sense, half consciously, that the LBC had saved me from, well, I won't say quite literally that it had saved my life, but I think it had delivered me probably from a life of alternating kind of successes and depression, ambition and depression. I'm telescoping my own story into two key words there, but so be it for this evening. Thank goodness. And I think I knew that already, okay, in my first months coming along here. But I didn't know I had a future in this. I worried that it might just be a phase. I don't know if any of you have had this experience, already really quite important to you, but you fear, I even feared other people's response, that this could just be a phase. I was in my 20s, I had been a bit lost for the few years before then, and I thought, what if I drift away from this, or what if I don't end up really taking this seriously, or what if I end up discovering something a bit unattractive about it and I move away? Actually, it's if you see that type of worried thought in somebody else, really it's only a symptom of taking it very seriously, and somebody thinking that thought is probably going to continue. As long as they don't find anything really weird. I think my first year or two was basically just checking it's not a cult. Just gradually, you know what I mean? People kept talking about the winter retreat. I thought, I'll go on a 2-day one, thank you. So 48 hours, your hand is near to the door all the time. So that was tick. So I went on 5-day one, etc. But anyway, I was coming along to classes, already meaning a lot to me. I needed to have surgery on my foot, so I needed to move away for a time. And Jnana Archer, who's a good friend of mine now, but one of my teachers, I would say, I said, he used to teach on the class. I said, oh, sorry, I'm not going to be able to come for a while. I've got to move away. It's going to be an hour and a half to come. I don't think I can make it for a class. And just in complete friendliness, he said, well, why don't you stay the night in the community when you come to the class, and you can come to dinner as well, and then you can travel home the next day. Really, really simple. Sounds like almost nothing. See, I know the impact of it in my own life, so tell the story, I think that sounds completely ordinary. But what did it do? It put me in touch with the Buddhist community. So I went to dinner upstairs. I observed people living together on the basis of a common ideal, to put it rather in a slightly highfalutin way. Basically, people having a laugh and taking something seriously, having dinner before going down to the class, swapping bits and bobs about that. One of them had cooked for everybody. I got a taste of that. Then I came down to the class, so you get a different view of the centre. Then went back upstairs, and I meditated with the community in the morning. And I felt a little bit kind of renewed, like I'd been on retreat for 12 hours. So I just wanted to mention a little story like that as the brimming over of somebody else's development, touching a newer person, in that case me, making a huge difference, but he probably thought nothing of it. I don't think he remembers it, except I've told him the story once or twice, because it had such a huge impact on me. Outside of that, he would never have remembered that, because it was ordinary friendliness from him. Okay. An even greater example of individuality brimming over, I think, is to be found in the story of our founder, Sangharakshita. It's he really that's given us this method of personal development, and I think that comes out of his own life story. You may or may not know it. When he was 16, I'm cutting a lot of long stories short tonight, but when he was 16, he, in a second-hand bookshop, read a Buddhist sutra, an extremely deep and abstruse Buddhist sutra, and realised, on reading it, not only that he was a Buddhist, but that he always had been one. Whatever that may mean, however far back he may have been referring to. He then basically worked ceaselessly for the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, until his death. Let me do my maths. Nearly 80 years later. So he spent, after this period in his teens, where he came across that book, not very long later, he spent 20 years in the East, before coming back and founding our movement. That period in the East is a kind of huge concentration of energies. He was writing, studying, meditating, meeting people, setting up activities, doing public speaking events, organising others and helping them associate together and practice the Dharma. And looking back on that now, it looks to us like the most perfect run-up for coming back to Britain and starting our movement, but it was by no means inevitable. He was invited back to Britain at first to heal a rift between two basically warring Buddhist organisations in London. The tiny Buddhist organisations who'd fallen out quite viciously, and he was invited to try and heal this. He was already a senior Buddhist in the world, really. He was certainly the most senior English-born Buddhist at that time, so they invited him back to try and harmonise between them. He came back to London and did what he knew how to do, gave lectures, met with people, behaved in a completely non-partisan way, was quite fiery. He banned a meditation practice, for example, that he knew was linked with mental illness, where people were practicing in too narrow a way and not getting to know themselves in the round before embarking on a really intensive program of meditation. And he did some other really outrageous things, like let his hair grow, like to 1 or 2 inches in length, and he appeared to be homosexual. Only appeared at this point, okay? So these were his crimes. He had hair about 2 inches long and seemed to be homosexual. Actually, he wasn't even sexually active at this time. Later, he became so. And it so happens that his taste was for men, but all that was in the future, okay? He just seemed to be associating with people in such a way that worried some of the people in these organisations about homosexuality, or as one person explained in a kind of awkward letter to him, wasn't in itself the problem, but the appearance of it was. And the letter described other behaviour, like the long hair, unbecoming in a monk. He was back in India on a lecturing tour when he got a letter saying, we're kicking you out on account of these behaviours, but if you like, you can write a letter saying, I've changed my mind, I resign, I've decided to stay in India, and we'll publish it for you. Okay? So what's that? That's like a sacking from a company with some weird NDA, as we would now call it, non-disclosure agreement, and say, but you can suggest that you've decided to resign if you like, and we'll say no more about it. Okay? Wrong person to do that with, really, because he was in touch with a kind of depth and unity of principle that went way, way beyond considerations like this. And he realised as he read this letter that he was fed up with petty considerations of that kind. This was the main spur he needed to start a new Buddhist organisation. So he stepped back into the territory of setting something up that helped people associate together. Okay? On the other hand, he knew that it needed to do certain things, needed to go way beyond certain principles of organisation that mundane bodies would have. The trustees who voted to kick him out and write him this letter, there were 5 of them. They voted 3-2 to kick him out. One of the 3 who voted to kick him out wasn't a Buddhist. Okay? So when he founded our order, he was completely clear that the people taking on responsibility in these institutions, in Buddhist centres and the charities and shops and communities and retreat centres associated with them, would be committed Buddhists. So no longer would you pay a subscription to become a member, have the right sort of CV, get into a senior position, and then basically exert a petty control of that kind. He wanted to turn that completely the other way up. So he knew that our order had to have as its main responsibility takers people who'd committed to the ideals that define that institution, not people who are good at institutions. Secondly, those individuals would be doing that in a context of going forth from conventional attitudes where those are not in harmony with the teachings of the Buddha. Like that kind of slight horror, according to English upper middle class manners in 1960s Hampstead. I don't want to say anything about any wider world than that, but that's what it was, 1960s upper class Hampstead. That fear of homosexuality or its appearance, reputation of such. What happened next? Our movement and order was born. He thought, I've had it with these people. I'm starting my own movement. It's going to work according to these principles. And in a sense, you can fast forward to now. Whatever you make of what we're doing, that's the attempt. You only take on trying to give back once you've committed and said, I want to base my life around this. And you do that by trying to go forth from the type of group conditioning that might bring about a closed or narrow attitude. As the most crisp condensation of this, I'm going to read you a telegram that he wrote in response to that letter. Okay? So he refers to things like an AGM, like the annual meeting of this charity that's trying to kick him out. He's been written to by a sort of half supporter who's a bit worried. So it's in telegram language. This is from India. He says, thank you, support, stop. You had to put stop in place for full stop. Glad you realise no evidence, main allegations, stop. That's the homosexuality. Not interested image, interested enlightenment. Supporters likewise, stop. Better split than united mediocrity, stop. I think that could almost be an aphorism for our order. Better split than united mediocrity, stop. Vihara tactics, disgraceful, stop. AGM, opportunity good purge, stop. He meant get rid of the people who are doing this. Wonder if you dare, stop. No intention being sacrificed, narrow Buddhist sterility, British respectability, stop. Not all your facts correct, writing immediately, stop, good luck. So now you have our order associating, trying to operate in that way that I've shown you. Of course, it's quite easy to identify with Sangharakshita in that story and think we would know better. But we might also have to look for, in ourselves, the resistant, controlling member of a group, because we've probably all done something like that ourselves. I don't mean we've kicked somebody out of a Buddhist organisation and all that, but we've probably all behaved in a narrow, uncomprehending way. And we may treat institutions like they're a thing that can give us security, status, predictability, maybe respectability. We've probably all done that. And too often also known, this is the other sort of pole, known exactly what's wrong with an institution, but not regarded ourselves as part of the solution. You say, well, this is what I don't like about such and such an aspect of society or my local Buddhist centre, as if you're standing outside it looking in. The real lesson for us is you can get involved. In fact, you can get as involved as you like, all the way to, for example, ordination and beyond, if you're interested. Because the institutions, in one way, are us. There's no thing out there that's the Buddhist centre that we're outside of looking in. Really, it's us. There's a Vajra... I think it's probably a Tibetan Buddhist saying, you only have a dirty rag, but you still have to clean the dirty window. They're talking there about the mind. It's probably one of those riddles. How do you clean the dirty window only using the dirty rag? They mean the mind. But the same thing is true collectively. In a way, it's the rag has dirt on it. We're imperfect. We ourselves are, as well as the others, as well as the institutions that have given us things, and that we may or may not like, and that may or may not suit us. But in a sense, we've still got to clean the dirty window. Yeah, you can join in. Basically, what Sangharakshita wanted to get rid of by founding an order that was neither monastic nor lay was a sort of infinitely subtle spectrum, all the way from somebody who comes to a meditation class from time to time to, well, somebody who is gaining stream entry, basically enough progress in the spiritual life that it's now irreversible. You progress towards enlightenment is guaranteed. He thought that once you're ordained, I believe this is right, it's probably an off-the-cuff remark, you could aim at stream entry within 15 years. Okay, it's quite heartening. It means basically you've gone forth from certain conventional attitudes about having a fixed self, going through the motions with regard to religious or spiritual activity, and doubt and indecision and confusion as to what it all means. If you crack those, you enter the stream and your progress towards enlightenment is guaranteed. It is not to do with practicing as a lay person at home and carrying on with your ordinary life, but chanting something on a Sunday night, or being a monk and wearing a robe and being given your food at certain times and not having to go shopping. He was basically doing away with, really it's more energised than that. I think he was trying to blow away that distinction completely and create what I'm calling this infinitely subtle spectrum along which you can go as far as you like through that scale I've just described. So you can commit more and more to individuality and what I'm calling its consequences. That may mean that sooner or later somebody sees you as the institution. And if you say you become a mitra and someone says, I'm really not sure about that Buddhist centre you're going to, you can't any longer say, oh, I know what you mean, because it's more comfortable. You may have to think, I do know what they mean. On the other hand, it's important to me, and I've got certain things I've committed to and don't want to betray there. So what do I say that's more creative? Our founder's been controversial sometimes. And when I was about to become a mitra, this thing that you can see some people doing on Sunday night, he didn't say, oh, how are you feeling about joining? He did something much smarter. He said, how do you feel about other people seeing you as associated with joining and asking you questions about our founder? How are you going to find that? And it was such a good question because it put the responsibility onto me. So I had to think, I think I'm all right with it. I think I can deal with that. Reasonable. Rather than inviting a lot of subjectivized sort of worry, oh yes, you're right, I'm really not quite sure. Maybe I should put it off for another couple of years. I was stepping into something which I could then make a little start on helping take responsibility for. And all situations really are like that, all collective situations. I was in a study group recently, not our study group, which somebody was complaining about. I was leading this study group, and he was saying, I don't really like it, it's too difficult to contribute, the atmosphere is not quite right, I don't know how to involve myself. And I had to say, you are 1/8 of the study group. So it's not a thing out there that you're simply perceiving, you need to make it more like what you want it to be. So that's a tiny institution that only existed for 2 weeks, but it's the same example. The great sort of message from this is we can commit more and make something like our Buddhist movement even, let's say Buddhism generally, but also our order, more like what you would like it to be. And every time somebody joins it, that's what they're doing. Our order names, like Bodhimati, Prajnamanas, Stillness, Shraddha-gita, and so on, all name qualities that we may have some of implicit in our self, but also name something that's now entering the order and that the order needs more of. So my name, Prajnamanas, mind of wisdom, that's saying I've got the potential to develop a mind of wisdom, but it's not just a private matter. If I really did have a wise mind, it couldn't remain one. In a way like the Buddha, as I told at the beginning of the Buddha's story, as I was saying at the beginning. If I really cultivated a wise mind, I'd be giving that to the order, I'd be giving that to the world. So I hope that's clear about the personal responsibility you can take by joining in with something and helping to create what the world needs. I don't know if I've talked about knowing the world, but I've talked rather a lot. So I'm only going to say another minute or two's worth. I think a community is where you understand and see more your own egotism, forgive that in others, and give others what you know you need. Let me say what I mean by that. We all want affirmation, love, comfort, presence, friends, and all sorts of other things. Yep. We know that we do, and Buddhism might seem to be telling us you shouldn't crave, you shouldn't want things. Yep. So you might decide, perhaps I better not do that. You might even decide, perhaps you better not do that. You might catch somebody doing it and point it out. Really what a community is for, seeing it in yourself, admitting that, without any blame, therefore forgiving it in somebody else, knowing how they feel, that they want affirmation, love, friendship and gifts, and giving it to them. So a community, I think, on whatever scale, whether it's a Buddhist centre or you live together or you work together or you know each other from here, is to do with forming together in that way. Because you're using the method of personal development to get to know yourself, in a sense you're getting to know others as you reflect in the Metabhavana. As within, so without. I want to be well and happy and to grow, so does that person. Of course they do. Let me give them what I've understood from inside is needed outside. So a community necessarily is an association of individuals in that way. You become more individual, but that means not only do your own wants lighten, your concern for the wants of others grows. And if you get a lot of people together doing that, you've got something very, very creative that's going to go way beyond mundane institutions and their petty concerns. It may need some organising principles, it may need some buildings, it may need some events and programmes and publicity and money, but really it's aiming at superconscious, not just superconscious states, but a kind of beyond the individual consciousness type state that you can achieve together if you're relating on that basis. You can only commit, however, as an individual. So all of that is up to each one of us. In the threefold puja, you may know the text, there are some lines that say, as one by one we make our own commitment, an ever-widening circle, the Sangha grows. I've only realised today that those two lines on their own could be studied, because he says as, comma, and he's a very careful writer, Sangharakshita, as one by one we make our own commitment. Yeah? You don't do it as a group. You don't get together with a load of friends at the pub and say, oh, I think that's a good idea, or I think that is too. Or do that, that thing where you're looking for a house or a flat, and you think you basically agree on cleaning and shopping and cooking, and you just go for it. Weeks down the line, it's clear you didn't. You can't do it like that. You commit as an individual because you have understood what's involved. As one by one we make our own commitment, an ever-widening circle, the Sangha grows. So you do it personally. In a sense, you do it in the privacy of your own mind inwardly, your own conviction, but you enter a Sangha which then grows because you yourself have joined it and you are now contributing to it. So with our order names, with becoming order members, that's what we're doing. But by coming along, that's what you're doing. And as you clarify the level of commitment that you want, you will know more and more what you bring, but be able to appreciate via the same mechanism more and more what others do. And so this spiritual community, this thing we're trying to create, can grow and not just be there to be a group of people, but to reach beyond everything we associate at the moment with our unenlightened minds with groups of people. Okay, I better leave it there. Thank you.